Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I'm your host, Andrew Crusoe, and today we pick up back in the south of France. Now, I had been thinking about going to Cassis, this beautiful coastal town on Côte d'Azur, the blue coast, right on the Mediterranean. I'd been thinking about going there for a while, and just 2 days after my last adventure, which you can listen to in the previous episode, just 2 days after, I finally braved the bus system to get over there. Now, I had to leverage this because as I've mentioned probably too many times, I got this really cool unlimited Metro pass, right? Now, my host and I was paying for an Airbnb. I wanted a stable spot. I was paying for an Airbnb in the south of Marseille, and my host cautioned me. She said, that bus route, they often fill up. You might want to get on that closer into town. But I'd seen the bus go by, and I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. I don't want to have to go all the way into town. That's like 3 or 4 miles. I'm going to see if I can catch it near where I was staying, because there was a bus stop within walking distance of where I was. So I start walking through the narrow alleyways and going around. I was actually in a place called La Baumette, which it's Baumette, I'm pretty sure. I haven't really spoken about La Baumette too much. It's kind of a southern little town, it's still kind of in Marseille. So it's basically Marseille. There's not too much to talk about, except for the fact that it's walking distance, well, for me, walking distance to some of the little bays and calanques. But one of the funny things about staying in La Baumette and walking to this bus stop was I would always pass by these dry, sort of sandy sidewalks, and there was this, limestone, and everything was walls, everything, you're just passing by sidewalks, and there's always a wall to your side. And I would always walk by these abandoned clusters of electric scooters. There are several apps that are popular in Marseille where you can rent a scooter, or basically it's almost like a little Segway, and you can zip around town and you pay a few euros and you can get around on your own. And that's a pretty good option if it's only one person. Although I did see 2 people on there a few times, which is entertaining. And I would always pass by this just cluster of there must have been 40, and it was a parking spot. The app would say, oh, you should leave your vehicle here, and you had to, right? You had to leave it in a designated spot because there are rules about where you can leave these things. You can't just have, discarded electric vehicles all over town. It would be a mess. So there's these designated drop-off points, and the bus stop was right across the street. So I get there, and I see the bus coming after waiting for a while, and I get really excited, and the bus kind of just slows down a bit, and I see it is completely at capacity, completely packed, and zooms by. I'm waving my arms I'm not a big person. Please let me in. They didn't matter. And I think I literally, very melodramatically, hung my head at that point. I was quite disappointed. So I began this walk into town. I could have tried to catch a bus. There aren't any. There's only 2. Infamously, there are only 2 metro lines in Marseille, which is really an oversight. It's something I would be more expecting to see in America than in France. So I think they're working on more lines, but there was no metro out there. There were only buses. They didn't come that often, so I just started walking into town. I reached one of the major intersections. I can't remember the name now. And I'm waiting, and I'm looking at Google Maps, which I always say for people who are getting new to a city, Google Maps still has the best, it's still the most universal collection of public transit data. There are other apps that you've probably seen, like Move It, and there's a green one, Transit something. But I sometimes dabble in those, and in some cities, they're a bit better. But Google Maps is still, for better or for worse, the standard. And I'm hoping, for the sake of competition mostly, that Apple Maps continues to get more and more public transit data as an aggregator to make it easy for travelers like us, so we can go to places and we don't need to download 45 different apps just to know what's going on. So many of us rely on our smartphones now to be in the right place at the right time. And it is a problem that computers are uniquely suited to do, especially in a device with GPS. This is a perfect application of a cell phone. It's to help you catch a bus, in my opinion. So I finally get on this bus, and it is a project. There are 20 people waiting to get on this bus. This is a big deal. And I get my pass, and I show them my pass, and they're like, So I get into the bus, and I proceed to be whisked along these coastal roads that hug these kind of like hills with dying golden colored grass. And at last, finally, I get dropped off in this very cute, very cozy, dropped off in a weird place, by the way, not downtown. I had to walk for about 5 or 10 minutes to get downtown. That bus route seemed like a bit of an afterthought, although I think that bus was going further on, maybe all the way to Nice or Cannes. I don't know if it's going to Cannes, but I get dropped off, and I'm really excited because I'm going to see some very famous calanques, at least one. I'm going to see some gorgeous blue water. I'm going to see some wild rock formations. I'm going to see, cute little beaches and just kind of people watch. It's fun when you're in a foreign country to sort of like just observe humans and how they can be different in different places and how they can be similar as well. And I was so lucky. It was a beautiful crystal blue sky, clear, warm sun coming down on these cobblestone streets. Just imagine these tan stone streets, just hand-placed, built into the ground that perfectly formed into the sidewalk. It was just one of the most attractive little towns I'd ever seen in my life, really. I go into a gift shop because I want to get a little postcard for my family. And I'm going to make a reference. Maybe nobody knows this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I think the parents, I'm not a parent, but I think the parents are going to know what I'm talking about when I say I turned around and there was a collection of purple, black, blue, and light yellow monsters, and they looked exactly like Lanky Box. I'm just going to leave that there. I couldn't believe some of the knockoff things that I was coming in contact with. They're scary monsters. I think it's Lanky Box. Yeah. Anyway, it's a YouTube channel. If you haven't heard of it, don't worry about it. So I make my way over to the beach, which I'm not going to lie, I was a bit disappointed by because it wasn't really sand. It was pebbles, pebbles like the size of your finger. But it was nice to be back by the ocean, back by the Mediterranean. I'll count that as the ocean. It's big enough. It's a sea. I know it's a sea. And I took some gorgeous, again, I'm going to promote the photos from this because that's how I support this show. People on my Patreon page, you already know this, but people who support the show at just $10 a month, that's the cost of like one thing at Starbucks these days, right? You can cancel at any time. Every week, you get tons of behind the scenes photos from each of these episodes. Usually I have like a dozen or so. They're shot in RAW, they're really good quality, and it just gives you much more depth about this adventure. And it gives you more of an inside look. I think it's called the inner circle level. Yeah. And I also provide over 20, I think I got like 28 hours of audiobooks for people who are on that level. You can stream all of that. 3 of those are Hawaii nonfiction. Those books have gotten over 400 ratings on Amazon now. And that audiobook series is narrated by me. You can stream that whole thing. And then there's my first tropical sci-fi audiobook is available, a commentary edition of that, which was originally narrated by a very talented narrator named Jeff Hayes. And I went through in 2024 and I narrated, for 2023 into 2024, I narrated like a commentary, sort of like a director's commentary, sort of interspersed with the professional produced audiobook for The Truth Beyond the Sky, and that's a lot of fun to listen to, and it's a lot cheaper if you like audiobooks. If you like audio content, and you're listening to audio content right now, right? That's much cheaper than buying my audiobooks on Audible. So there's my pitch for my Patreon. You can always, and I actually give away a lot of stuff for free, including this podcast, every week. And you can sign up for free and get all the free stuff and just try it for free first if you want. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Hello Crusoe, HELLOCRUSOE. And I had a lot of fun photographing this really gorgeous. This sea was crystal blue. It was just a very picturesque. It vaguely reminded me, the French people might hate me for saying this, but it vaguely reminded me of the California coast, actually. Enjoying little bits. And there's it's just cliffs. It's just sheer cliffs for a lot of this. It's pebbled beaches and sheer cliffs. And I wanted to walk to this little calanque, right? I wanted to walk to this little bay. Now, I'm at the Bay de Cassis, but this bay I was walking to was not the easiest thing to reach. There was no public transit, and it was called Port-Miou, which is M-I-O-U, and it's one of the most famous little inlets, little calanque inlets in Cassis, and I wanted to walk there, and it took me a little while, like half an hour, not too bad. And on my walk, and I'll definitely include this was so funny, I'm really into pine cone symbology, for what it's worth, because the pine cone in ancient mythology is symbolic of the pineal gland, which is a little bitty gland in your brain that, look it up, produces DMT, which is important for dreaming and for vision quests. You can look up DMT. It's that the scope of that topic is far beyond this podcast, but I like to take pictures of pine cones in the wild when I see them, especially when they're large sculptures, so I had a little fun with that. I just think it's really funny how I attract pine cones into my life. And I finally reached Calanque de Port-Miou. They have a very nice Calanque National Park system in the south of France where they have explanations all in French, so you have to use Google Translate. But as I've explained in previous episodes, that's not too bad. As long as you have a bit of data on your phone, you can point your phone at that and you can get those translated into whatever language you like. So I finally reached this beautiful inlet of, there was even a teeny tiny white beach, and people were just hanging out on inflatable kayaks and stuff, and it was so peaceful. The only bummer was that it had become a yacht parking lot. There were, they built all these piers along the edge, and it's pretty narrow. Like it was, I don't know, less than 50 meters across, less than 100 feet across. It was like this finger that kind of poked into and ended at that tiny white beach I mentioned. And I sat there for a while watching people do stand-up paddleboard beyond, just past all of the many, many dozens of white yachts. But it was honestly, it was almost just as pretty to turn around and look at these sheer limestone, I believe it was limestone, I'm not a geologist, limestone cliffs covered in these scrub brush and just the crystal blue sky behind. It was, there was a sense of like pristineness to the rock formations. The only problem was that the bus doesn't run that late. In fact, I think the last one left at about 5 or 5:30, and it was already like 4:30, so I was like, oh man, I'm out of time. And I started just running across town, practically, passing these very posh, very cute neighborhoods, these like condominiums. And that you could tell that this was where the fancy French people really wanted to live, or at least to go on holiday to enjoy that. And got some really lovely shots of the cliffs, just these cliffs in the distance, these really, again, it reminded me of Big Sur. These layers and layers and layers of sedimentary rock just piled up over great periods of time, and incredibly clean. The sidewalk's so incredibly clean. The late afternoon sun casting stark, long shadows across everything. It was just, I don't know how to say it, except that it was such a remarkably cute, charming city. And I wish that I'd had more time. I wish I'd had more time to hang out because there are definitely hikes around there. But I had heard that it was even risky that sometimes you couldn't even get back, that the bus would be really full getting back. So I was feeling quite nervous. So I got back to the bus stop and I ended up being there like a bit early. And to my luck, there was a grocery store, a petit marché, we could say, a small market, where I suddenly realized I was totally starving and because I hadn't eaten at all since I'd been there. I'd been there for half of the day, and I'd just been walking and exploring and enjoying walking on the pebbled beaches and walking across town. So I don't remember what I grabbed. I think I may have grabbed a couple energy bars and a juice, and managed to get back to the bus stop. I wasn't sure where it was going to stop. I didn't take pictures of this, so my memories of this is a little fuzzy, but I remember there was a lot of stress and confusion around where the bus stop was because it wasn't quite labeled very well. And it just seemed like, I don't know what they were doing. But I didn't feel like I was in a position to complain, because it was covered under my unlimited pass. So I felt like, it was a mini vacation for free from where I was sitting. Sure enough, there was a lot of people trying to get back on that bus, and I want to say there were a few people that, this was a little while ago. I don't think they had, or maybe I think a second bus came. So I got on the first bus and we started continuing onward, and then another bus was going to come. It was just like, it was stressful. And the whole ride back, which is a very pretty ride through back around those hills coming up, 'cause it's about 20 kilometers. That whole ride back, I was kind of going back and forth in my mind. I was like, do I want to try that again? Do I risk being marooned in Cassis? Do I try that again? And I guess I'll leave it to you to find out if I do try that again. But I made it back to Marseille, and they dropped me off. I decided to ride it to kind of a funny stop near the water, because by this point I was pretty comfortable walking around Marseille. Once you're in the south side of Marseille, it's not that bad. Like the worst case, you're going to walk for a half an hour to get to where you're staying, which I really enjoyed. And that was something and I could have a whole rambly tangent about this, but I won't. That was something that I really appreciated. It was something I really appreciated about the French and the Europeans in general. How I'll throw my own country under the bus a little bit, although it's not really fair to generalize America, because America, as I will probably ramble on at some point about, America's really like 5 different countries in terms of the variation in the culture. But wow, the French people are so much more comfortable with walking than Americans are on average. And it was something that I adjusted to, and I really grew to appreciate. And I was dropped off sort of the south side, and I even saw from the rocky coast, I watched this family fishing, standing on again these rock formations that just like dropped off in these shelves of rock. This old rock went into the Mediterranean. They're standing fishing. It was this really cute family with 2 kids, and in the distance I saw Notre Dame on the hill. From the distance where I'd been just a few days before, and some sailboats and lovely things. Actually, I think we can find out where I was. I was near Plage du Montrose, and plage is beach. Curious. So I was near Montrose Beach, and of course I had to wait for another bus. So I wandered back. I will say it is very cool to be around all these amazing rock formations. It's really woven into the city, especially that part, the south side of Marseille. There really is a sense of like a harmony of a kind with nature. And I grew to really appreciate that unique climate, because it was quite dry, and there were quite a few fire warnings, and they had closed for several days. They closed all of the calanques. When I first arrived, I think I mentioned this, I couldn't even go into the park because it just hadn't rained, and they didn't want to risk anyone getting hurt, so they had all the parks closed. Again, it's really hard to do Cassis or any part of Côte d'Azur justice. Just describing it, you just have to, go there for yourself, or you can support the show and, even you can grab it for a month and then cancel, and you can see the beautiful shots I was able to capture of this. It was a very peaceful, lovely place, and I really wanted to get out of Marseille for a bit. By this time, it was starting to get very hot, and my enthusiasm was starting to get really sapped from how hot it was getting. And probably next time I will at some point share more of the creative solutions I had to come up with to be able to sleep. Because I can handle the hot during the day, but the hot during the night is a problem. So thank you for coming with me on this little brief jaunt. This is all the time I have for today, unfortunately. But next week, we most likely will talk about the gorgeous, panoramic, really surprises all around, surprising abound. I can't even talk anymore. I'm just totally delirious how excited I am to share with you the hike to Croix, which is Cross de Marseille Vert, the Cross of Marseille, if I'm translating that correctly, and I may not be, but this was a really delightful experience going to one of the most special little hike, not little actually, quite full featured wanders. There's vague trespassing. I think this is a cross from the Knights Templar. We'll get into that next time. Until then, thank you for listening. I'm Andrew Crusoe. You can follow me on all the places. My username is @, or if you're in India, they say @. Go figure. It's an @. You know what it is. It's an A with a circle around it. Hello Crusoe. The word hello, CRUSOE. That's also my Patreon username. And when you follow for free, you get to hear these shows right when they come out. You get a little email. And I also do other periodic free bits that come out and fun little announcements of upcoming books. I've got some pretty big things coming out next year that I'm really excited about. And yeah, I just want to thank you again for coming along with me. The show is still evolving. It's still becoming what it's going to become. And I really appreciate every comment that I get. It really encourages me to keep going and to inspire you to go outside your comfort zone, to follow strange trails and see what you learn about yourself. You'd be surprised. It's one of the most beautiful parts of life is following the strange trails, in my opinion. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe on Spotify. That's free. The link to that is in the show notes for this episode, or you can just look up Wanderous on Spotify. It's WANDEROUS. And that's all for now. I'm really looking forward to wrapping up these adventures in Marseille. We're going to go to Paris after that. We're going to go to Istanbul after that. And then it gets really crazy. See you next time.